Hi, everybody, and good evening. And my name is Brenda Moynihan. I'm the Director of Marketing and Outreach here at the Kensington Assisted Living. And I'm honored to welcome you to our presentation for this evening. Tonight's presentation is How to Mitigate the Effects and Lower Your Risk of Alzheimer's Disease, Part 1, Diet, Exercise, and Your Current Health Risk. During this presentation tonight, we will address the difference between dementia and Alzheimer's disease versus other dementias, information on diet, exercise, and health risk for Alzheimer's and cognitive decline, and much more. And before I introduce our speakers, I'd like to briefly give you some information about the Kensington. The Kensington is an enhanced assisted living, and we're located in White Plains, New York. We are committed to providing outstanding care every day with a full spectrum of clinical support, including caring for those with Alzheimer's and additional dementias. We encourage independence and confidence and focus on making each individual feel important. Our promise is to love and care for your family as we do our own. If you'd like information about the Kensington and ways we can assist you, please feel free to call us at 914-390-0080 or go to our website at www.thekensingtonwhiteplains.com. Please join me in welcoming our speakers, Dr. Jason Cohen and Joan Nemo. Jason Cohen is a board-certified neurologist. He is an assistant professor of neurology at Montefiore Medical Center and the Albert Einstein College of Medicine in the Bronx. He attended medical school at the Mount Sinai School of Medicine, then moved to Montefiore, where he completed his internship residency in adult neurology and a fellowship in geriatric neurology. He is now based at Montefiore's Multidisciplinary Center for the Aging Brain and is part of a team working to diagnose and manage cognitive decline in older adults. He is an educator and teaches neurology and psychiatry trainees, medical students and physicians, and other health professionals from various specialties about dementia. Our second speaker for this evening, Joan Nemo. Joan is a licensed clinical social worker and care consultant, director of professional education with the Hudson Valley, New York chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. Joan has been working with people with dementia, plus their caregivers, for over 20 years, including a private practice in New York City and the Berkshires. Joan was an adjunct professor at Berkshire Community College. She has worked with elders in the community, assisted living, and the nursing home environment. Welcome our speakers, Dr. Cohen and Joan.
Thank you, Brenda.
Sure.
Thank you.
Okay, I'm going to go away now.
Okay. All set? Okay. Okay, well, welcome everyone. I'm glad you could come this evening. And I wanted to start out by talking about what is dementia. And dementia is not a diagnosis. Dementia is a group of symptoms, including memory loss, confusion, trouble making decisions, but it's an umbrella term. Alzheimer's is one of the most common types of dementia that we see. Chris? This is an analogy I like to use. When we talk about dementia, dementia is like the word flower. And then we have different types of flowers. We have daisies and pansies and roses and all sorts of things. So if we look at dementia and the related dementias, Chris, we can use the same analogy. Dementia is the overall term. It corresponds with flower. It's an umbrella term. But there are different causes for the dementia symptoms. The most common one that we know of is Alzheimer's disease. And that accounts for between 60 and 80% of all dementias. We also have vascular dementia, which is less common as the sole cause of dementia, accounting for about 10% of all the cases. Vascular dementia can occur when there is a reduced blood flow to parts of the brain, such as after a major stroke or a series of mini strokes. There's also frontal temporal dementia, which refers to a group of disorders caused by progressive nerve cell loss in the brain's frontal lobes, which is the areas right behind your forehead, or in the temporal lobes, which are right behind your ears. Common symptoms include changes in personality and behavior, as well as difficulty with language. And many people with frontal temporal dementia are diagnosed in middle age, anywhere from their early 40s to early 60s. And we've also heard of dementia with Lewy bodies. Lewy bodies are clumps of a specific protein called alpha-synuclein. When these protein clumps develop in a part of the brain called the cortex, dementia can result. Symptoms include those common with Alzheimer's, but also movement symptoms like stiffness and shuffling and problems with balance and falls. And then the other term, which isn't on here, is mixed dementias, when there is a clinical evidence of 2 or more causes of dementia. The individual is considered to have a mixed dementia. And most commonly, we see this with Alzheimer's combined with vascular dementia. Chris? So the numbers that were released in the Alzheimer's Association's recent facts and figures are based on data that we got from the 2020 US Census and the Chicago Health and Aging Project. This is what it shows. Presently, that there are 6.2 million people over 65 who have Alzheimer's or related dementia. And we're talking about people 65 plus here. And that means about 1 in 9 people have some kind of Alzheimer's or related dementias. It breaks down to the 65 to 74 age group, 1.7 million. 75 to 84, 2.25, 85 plus, 2.27. In New York State alone, we found that there were 410,000 people who have Alzheimer's or related dementia. By 2025, we expect that to go up to 460,000, which is an increase of 12.2%. Chris? There's no cure for Alzheimer's right now. Okay, we were going to skip this. There's no cure for Alzheimer's right now, but there's a great deal of research going on. The Alzheimer's Association, along with the federal government, are spending a great deal of time and money for it. We have medicines that can lessen the symptoms, but today and next week, we're going to talk about the mitigation, which is defined as, I looked up mitigation. It's the lessening of the gravity of something. How can we reduce that? And research has shown that there are things that can be done to slow down the progression. And getting educated, which you are doing right here today, is a start, and that's wonderful. And these are some of the modifiable risks that people can look at earlier, and Dr. Cohen is going to speak to a lot of these things. So we're going to go on to the next slide, please. Thanks, Chris. So the studies by the federal government, by international agencies, and also by the Alzheimer's Association, and we are second only to the federal government in how much we spend on research, have shown that these are some of the mitigating factors that we have. And by the way, if you are interested in being part of a research study, we are always looking for volunteers. We have a program called Trial Match. You can call our 800 number, which Brenda's going to put up for us later, and sign up for it. And you can see if you fit into some of the groups. We have medication, we have lifestyle changes. There's many, many different types of research. It's very exciting to be part of something like that. We are looking for people who have some kind of dementia. We also are looking for healthy people. So if you're interested, please give us a call. But we have found that there are some lifestyle changes. And one of the big studies that we've done over many years is the Pointer study. And it shows that basically exercise, diet, mental stimulation, social interactions, A healthier lifestyle is what we're talking about. And obviously, you should not do any kind of change until you consult with your physician and get and make sure that you don't have other issues that are going to impact it. And if exercise is great, but don't decide to run a marathon tomorrow until you check with your doctor. It might not be a great idea. Diet is another thing, but a lot of what we deal with in the Alzheimer's Association are mental stimulation and social interactions. I like to think of the brain as sort of like a muscle. You know, we have to keep our muscles active, so to keep in shape, and we have to do the same with our brain. So if we keep our minds active, if we challenge ourselves, often people will learn a new language or pick up a new hobby. Certainly before COVID, we would go out to maybe go out to classes, or I'm a big advocate of going to the local library and going to a lecture that's there or something. Now we're doing a lot of things on Zoom. And certainly the association we have wonderful programs that you can partake of. And the same with the social interactions. And we're going to talk about more of these later, next time. But social interactions are so important. We're finding that also keeps us at a higher level mentally. And that's keeping in touch with family and friends. And if you are in some kind of organizations or a faith community, or we have a lot of social engagement programs that we like to do so that people can talk to each other and be involved with each other. So Chris, next slide. So the Alzheimer's Association is here to help you. We have support groups, education programs, as I mentioned, a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week helpline. If you have questions, call us, reach out, and we can help with those things. And our phone number is on the next slide if you want to call us. And our website, please, the resources are here. And we're going to go into more of them next week. But these are the resources that we are here to help everyone. But right now, we're going to talk some more about the research. And Dr. Cohen is going to pick up and take over from here. So Dr. Cohen, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you so much, Joan. And folks, I just want to remind you, we will have an end slide at the very, very end with information on how you can contact the Alzheimer's Association and Dr. Cohen. I know he's there.
Hello.
Great.
And 1 second. Hi. So first, thank you, Brenda, for inviting me. Thank you, Joan. At our center at Montefiore, we work very closely with the Alzheimer's Association, and they're involved in so many wonderful projects and so many important projects. So really, thank you to you and their entire organization. I'm going to be speaking specifically today about lowering the risk of Alzheimer's disease, and specifically through diet, exercise, and health risks. Some of the studies have focused on memory overall, where I have information where we do have more specifics. I was going to be focusing on Alzheimer's as the most common kind of dementia in the country. And I don't have any disclosure, so not getting paid for this or by anyone other than my hospital. Don't have any other affiliations to disclose. The FDA, the Food and Drug Administration, has not approved any of these other treatments or any of these things I'm going to talk about, except for one specific slide. And also, you should know that these are general recommendations. And as Joan said, if you have specific questions on how these things might apply to you, talk to your doctor. But this isn't specific medical advice for you. This is general best practices to keep our brains and our bodies healthy and hopefully significantly lower the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease. So I heard that 2 cups of berries a day can slow down dementia, or maybe interval training, but no, not cross training, maybe can prevent Alzheimer's disease. Or maybe, oh, this medication causes memory loss. So both professionally and also just day to day, you hear all sorts of stuff about what kinds of things might lower your risk or increase your risk of developing memory loss. So today I'm going to first start with how do we know what advice to give, right? What do we tell people? And then I'm going to go into a little bit of the specifics about diet, exercise, and controlling health problems. But to start with is, why am I telling people, how do I know what to recommend to people? Why am I telling people what I tell them? So the difference between I tried A, look at me, I'm doing well, or I gave B to 5 people for 2 weeks and they did great. Or medication C or option C, right? I gave it to 500 people, and 500 people I gave a dummy pill, a placebo, that looked the same, tasted the same, smelled the same. You couldn't tell the difference for 6 months. And not only did the people who were getting that medication or that vitamin or that supplement not know who got the real thing and who got the placebo, I didn't know either. And so I had to write down how I thought people did. You got better, you got worse, you got worse, you got better, you did the same, and better. And after I sealed my answers, only then could I open up the envelope and go, whoa, hey, you got better, but you were getting the dummy pill, you were getting the placebo, you got better, you were getting the real one. But I had to wait until the end to find out. So that's called a double-blind experiment. And so I have a lot more confidence if I see option C to say, yes, this is something that I should probably recommend to people as opposed to A or B. But wait, what happens if not only is it blind, but what happens if I choose my people and which group they're in randomly? So it's not like, oh, well, everyone at the Kensington is going to be in one group and everyone at this other place that's not so good is going to get the other. Well, that's not fair. I don't know if that's going to work. But also, how about if I tell people ahead of time, you know what, this is exactly what I'm going to look at. This is how I'm going to look at it. And I'm going to publish it for the world to see. And so I can't fudge my numbers ahead of time, or I can't fudge my numbers after the fact if I don't kind of like the results that I see. I'm going to tell you exactly what I'm going to look at and how. And that exists. It's called clinicaltrials.gov. So right now you can go on and you can look for any study that's out there for a medication especially, and we're supposed to tell people exactly what we're going to do ahead of time. No monkey business. Ideally, I shouldn't have a financial interest in the outcome, right? If I'm going to get paid more because I find a positive result, you can believe I'm going to find it, but that's not what I want to recommend to people. And also, at the end of it, multiple people who have no close connection to my study should also take a look at what I said and say, is this any good, or am I just a good salesman? And really, this is not such a good idea, something called peer review. So not everything could be tested through all of these, and everyone's biased, including me. No study can be perfect, and you can find a flaw with any study, but if there's more risk to something, right? If there's a higher potential for side effects, then I need more proof, right? I really need someone to convince me. If there's a greater cost to society, so around the world, people are spending billions and billions with a B on memory supplements, for example, and well, there's a lot that could be done with that money. So it's not necessarily a high risk to the individual person, but as a society, right, should we be spending billions on an intervention? There's a new Alzheimer's medication that has been proposed that between the infrastructure that would be needed to administer it and to monitor for safety would cost millions and millions of dollars just at a small scale. And so, is that something that's worth it? Or is that something that we could do better with and we can help people more for if there's a higher cost to society? And also the interventions being given to more people. So if I have something that I'm going to recommend that 300 million people do across the country, I've got to be really, really sure that it is both safe and effective. Otherwise, I can't recommend it to that many people. Right. So as an example, the coronavirus vaccine, we have to make sure that it's really, really safe. And thankfully they did before we start recommending that everyone under the sun get it, as opposed to, oh, well, you have coronavirus right now. It's a much smaller number of people and you are already, right, there's already something that you have and we have to do something now. Right. I still want proof, but I have to have more proof if I'm giving this intervention to more people. So for today's talk, where I'm going to recommend things that pretty much everyone should do, I have to have a lot higher burden of proof before I start recommending things. So not good sources of information, right? Twitter and Facebook might be a good way to find out about some ideas, but to learn about something, no. JohnsMemoryCures.com, drug companies. Pfizer makes some great products, but I don't want to learn from Pfizer. I want to learn from people and medical centers and other things that aren't making money off of having people take their product. So a group like the Alzheimer's Association, a group like Caring Kind, the Association for Frontotemporal Dementia, the Lewy Body Resource Center, the Lewy Body Dementia Association, Cure PSP, the CDC, National Health Service, right? We can see what they're doing in the UK, Australia's National Health Service. These are groups that are dedicated to giving people fair, non-biased information and don't really have a motivated reasoning in terms of what information they're given, right? Their interest is making sure that everyone has got the best information to make the best decisions for themselves, to keep ourselves healthy, and if we do have symptoms, if we do have problems, to take the best care of ourselves. So I really recommend this bottom group of organizations to get our information. And the top, sure, you can find something interesting, but not a good way to learn about these different topics. And then before we get into the specifics, so this presentation is going to be out of date pretty soon, and that's a good thing, right? The truth today is hopefully not going to be the truth tomorrow, right? Sometimes you find out that information is actually incorrect. More likely it's going to be more nuanced, and we're going to learn a lot more tomorrow. We're going to be a lot smarter tomorrow about some of this stuff than we are today. And today we do better than we did yesterday. So having to update your slides or change your mind is probably a sign that you're doing something right, as opposed to, well, I heard yesterday this, and now people are saying that. That's actually a good thing, right? That's how science works, and we have our best answers. So, right, we try to always keep an open mind, and hopefully we have better answers tomorrow. Right now, we have nothing. We have nothing that is approved. We have nothing that is proven to cure or slow down Alzheimer's disease. That's it. So we really have to focus on preventing, on lowering the risk. Or even if I can't necessarily lower your risk ultimately of getting it, if I can delay you getting it by 5 years, well, that still does a lot. So right now we do have FDA approved treatments that can help your symptoms, but it's kind of like breaking a bone and giving you a pain medicine, right? If you take Tylenol for a broken bone, your arm feels better temporarily, but doesn't fix your bone, right? Your bone is still broken, and your Tylenol is not going to make your bone get better any faster. When that Tylenol wears off, your bone's still going to be, your arm's still going to hurt. So we have 4 FDA approved medications and one that's a combination of 2 of the above that really do work. They help your symptoms, but they don't prevent people from getting worse. And there really aren't any other medications that are approved. Not really, there aren't any other medications that are approved for the symptoms. And so we get creative, we take what we know and we try to find the best combinations that are possible. But again, even more important, to delay, to slow down, to prevent whatever we can. How do we do that? So let's start with diet. The most evidence, the most number of studies have been done on this thing that's called the Mediterranean diet. What is it? Well, it's high intake of fruit, of vegetables, legumes, so beans, lentils, cereals, unsaturated fatty acids, like especially olive oil, medium to high intake of fish, less dairy, and not very much of meat and other kinds of not so good fats. Regular intake of alcohol, not over the top, but regular to moderate intake is also a part of this diet. And if you think about, when we think about the biology, the first thing we want to say is, well, does this make any sense? Because people can have all sorts of claims, but is this reasonable? Well, we know that doing these things can lower your cardiovascular risks, your risks of heart disease, your risks of high blood pressure, can lower inflammation, can lower stress in the body, can lower oxidative stress. So it's reasonable. It's a good first start. And then there are what are called biomarkers, basically things that I can measure, things that I can put a number on, that are specific, that I can test, that even if they don't tell me, do I have better memory, right? That's great, but that takes a long time to figure out, is this going to prevent dementia in 10 years? Well, I want to have some sort of evidence before then that I can lower my risk. So biomarkers are specific testable things that kind of tell me I'm going on the right path. So there are biomarkers that support it, and there are actually randomized placebo-controlled trials that were done, and they show some better outcomes. Overall, we think that compared to people who closely follow this kind of a diet, those who are quite far from the diet, there's a 30% lower risk over time for memory loss and for dementia. So pretty good. Not perfect, but pretty good. A number of other diets have been tested. One of them is DASH, the Dietary Approach to Stop Hypertension. Has many similar features of the Mediterranean diet. Here, there's more emphasis on dairy, less emphasis on other fat intake. Otherwise, it's relatively similar, also biologically reasonable, we have biomarkers to support it. We know that it lowers blood pressure among those who are at high risk of blood pressure. It's less studied than the Mediterranean diet, but and there are a couple of studies that showed a little more effect, some that showed a little bit less, but overall we have pretty good evidence that we could say, yes, this kind of a diet is very reasonable and is probably a good idea to lower your risk of developing Alzheimer's. Third diet in terms of what's been studied out there is something called the MIND diet. Here they specified berries, nuts, green leafy and other vegetables, seafood, poultry. So I mentioned a couple of other things. Less intake of red meats, pastries, sweets, margarine, fried food. So again, a couple of differences from the Mediterranean diet. Overall is relatively similar. Also very reasonable in terms of the biology, in terms of how we know the brain and the body work. We also have support from these biomarkers, a little bit less studied than the others, but we also have some good evidence. And there are many, many other diets that have been studied, but overall there's less evidence. There are fewer studies, there are smaller studies, or just watching people for less amount of time. So it's harder to draw conclusions, but you sort of see the parallels between the diets that we know work, and we can say, well, things that look like this are more likely to work, and things that aren't, we can't really say yet. Well, what about whatever nut, berry, other miracle food you prefer? What about this? Well, single foods or single nutrients are overall less likely going to be helpful. One, you're eating a lot less of cashews than you are of an entire diet, hopefully. And so the amount of benefit that you're going to get from any one thing is going to be less than a general diet. And also, as part of a general diet, most likely you're going to have some parts that enhance other parts. So we know that, right, eating fish has benefit that we can demonstrate, that we can show you, that you don't get from fish oil. So trying to put it into a pill, at least as far as we've been able to prove to people before, and again, I need some proof before I can start telling people, doesn't seem like fish oil really does very much for lowering your risk of Alzheimer's, but eating fish actually does. So there's more than just the sum of its parts. There's more than just the fish oil when you're having fish. Eating a salad isn't just the multivitamin, you're having in combination with other stuff, and those nutrients and that, combination, that the environment in your stomach probably helps different nutrients get in different ways. So having a real food is going to be better than one individual thing. Also, though, it's hard to get evidence for specific foods. So, hey, did you eat cashews yesterday? Everyone, raise your hands. I can't see you, so you don't actually have to raise your hands. Anyone eat cashews yesterday? I want to know if cashews lower your risk of memory loss. Well, should you count cashews from 2 days ago? Nope, 2 days ago doesn't count. I'm going to put it in anyway, right? Because I ate cashews 3 days ago, 2 days ago, and 5 days ago. So I'm just going to put it in. Well, that's not the same. Well, how about you eat any cashews in the last month? Well, I don't know. What did I eat in the last month? I don't remember what I ate in the last month. Okay, I want you to think about every grocery, every food thing you've bought in the last month. Any nuts, any cashew, anything that might have cashews, any friend who served you cashews, mixed nuts, cashew butter, takeout, restaurants, prepared food with cashews. Think about this. This is important, right? I want to know, and I want to be able to prove to someone if cashews make a difference. Well, I could spend 5 minutes on this one specific food item because I'm convinced that cashews is the one, but I don't know. It sounds like there's a chance that I might be biased there, right? Why do I think cashews as opposed to anything else? So that's, maybe that's not going to be the most accurate way to get that information. Or I could spend 5 minutes on one thing, and then I'm going to repeat it for 500 foods because I want to keep a really open mind. Well, I don't know about you, but have you ever tried to fill out, I've tried to fill out surveys that try to go into this detail for 500 different things. By page 2, I don't know if the answers I'm giving are any good. By page 5, I know those answers are not going to be as good as page 1. So me being able to prove to you that cashews in particular, as opposed to Brazil nuts, as opposed to walnuts, as opposed to whatever, is going to be a lot harder. And if I can tell you cashews, well, really? How do you know? How do you know compared to peanuts or anything else? And how many cashews, by the way? Turns out that 18 medium cashews is a 1 ounce serving. How many cashews did you eat yesterday? Forgot to count. Well, I'm sorry, but you can't be in our survey anymore. So again, it's as an example, when someone's trying to tell you that food X is better than food Y and food Z is really gonna help your memory, well, are they trying to sell you food Z or food X or food Y? And how do they know? My boss at Montefiore actually has done some of these studies, and it's very tricky to do these dietary studies and figure out. So just always have a healthy degree of skepticism. And by the way, thank you to the Cleveland Clinic website, because that's where I actually found out how many cashews and almonds and Brazil nuts are in a 1 ounce serving. So alcohol. So mild to moderate drinking may lower your risks. Well, what's that, right? How much is mild to moderate alcohol? Well, kind of depends on the study. It seems like maybe 1 to 2 drinks a day, maybe 1 to 3. Does it matter based on male versus female, based on how your body metabolizes it, based on how big you are? Sure, but hard to get that level of detail because, well, one, doing a study on alcohol is hard. Hey, how much did you drink yesterday, right? 2 people don't always answer you in the most accurate way. Also, 5 drinks in a week is not the same as 5 drinks on a Friday night. And we know there's a higher risk of alcohol, high risk of dementia, of Alzheimer's disease with heavy drinking. And even if on average you're not drinking too much, doing what's called binge drinking, in other words, having a large amount of alcohol at one time, is actually also quite dangerous to your brain and many other parts of your body. So I wouldn't recommend you start drinking if you're not already, but if you are, and you're doing it carefully and responsibly, then it might actually lower your risk of developing Alzheimer's or other dementias. And also, by the way, if you drink enough, you actually might have a lower risk of alcohol if you die first. So 1 person every 50 minutes in the US dies in an alcohol-related car crash. So by the time we started this presentation to the time we're done, someone's going to have died in the US on average of an alcohol-related car crash. So alcohol does not mean not using alcohol responsibly, which is the key thing, because it is a lot easier to have bad outcomes, and the risk of a bad outcome from alcohol is a whole lot higher than the protective benefit of moderate drinking. So drinking is fine, but in moderation. What about coffee? Thankfully, and I can say I am clearly biased here, thankfully, there has been no clear evidence that it affects the risk of Alzheimer's. Everyone loves to study coffee. You see a study in whatever media outlet or newspaper you want, every few months. Coffee does this. And then 3 minutes later, coffee does not do. Well, as best we can tell, looking across all of these studies, it doesn't really affect the risk. And there are a whole lot of other foods out there that have very, very limited evidence. A lot of these are being studied. So as Joan mentioned, right, we need people in research studies. We need people with memory loss. We need people without memory loss, because the only way we know what to recommend to people is we test it. We try to be as careful as possible. And some of them are medication studies, but some of them are, what did you eat yesterday? How many cashews? Don't worry, people are not actually going to ask you how many cashews as a prerequisite to being in a study. But we want to know, and we're really trying to find out. But most of the other foods out there have too little evidence or not good enough quality evidence to really comment on it. And yes, I am in the pocket of big coffee. So exercise, part 2. How do we lower our risk of Alzheimer's through exercise? Well, also, exercise is tricky, right? How much did you exercise? How high did you get your heart rate? You didn't check. What kind of exercise? Well, we also know that people who exercise are not necessarily the same as people who don't exercise or are not active, right? Is it the exercise, or is it the diabetes that has a higher or lower risk depending on your activity? or maybe it's having the time to exercise, right? The person who's working 2 jobs to put food on the table, right? Like that person might have a different risk of developing Alzheimer's, but maybe that's not the exercise. Maybe that's the social and economic world in which she or he lives. So, right, we're trying to figure out, well, which part of it is actually increasing your risk? And also we know that people who later on develop who later on develop Alzheimer's disease or other kinds of dementia can have very, very mild, subtle changes in their mood, in their memory, their willingness to get exercise, their balance, and other things. And maybe some of those changes are what we think, oh, well, people who don't exercise get. No, it turns out that those people already had Alzheimer's, but we didn't know it yet. You had to follow them for 2 years, for 4 years before you realized, that change was actually the earliest markers, the earliest signs of Alzheimer's. And that's why some of the things we're seeing are actually not a risk, we're just seeing the earliest signs. So again, thinking about how we know and what we recommend. With all that being said, there are a lot of reasons that biologically exercise is probably a really good idea. We know that it changes inflammation. We know that it strengthens your immune system. We know it stimulates neurons. It might help with neurons' ability to grow and remodel themselves to plasticity. We have increasing biomarker support for all of these, some more than others, but we have increasing sort of collateral or other evidence that each of these seems to work and seems to make a difference and drive the effects of Alzheimer's. We know that it helps our bodies repair itself in different ways, how cells communicate with each other. So we have all of these different ways that exercise might work. We have increasing support that each of them work. And then big picture for the brain. So if you have 2 groups of people, one of them get exercise and one of them doesn't. The group of people whose brains exercise, their brains shrink less over time, both overall and in specific chunks of brain that seem to be more important for memory. We know that parts of the brain have better connections with exercise, and the function of the brain, how the brain actually talks to each other, seems to be better with exercise. Now, granted, imperfect studies, smaller numbers, but when everything's pointing in the right direction, you have a lot more confidence that what you're saying is real. We have other indirect evidence. So if you take a mice that has something that's like Alzheimer's and you actually cut open its head and look under a microscope, you actually see less of this protein called amyloid. And then, well, what happens if you take people who actually have Alzheimer's? Half of them get more exercise, half don't. It helps their memory. It helps their function. People are actually able to do more like practical stuff on a day-to-day basis in the groups that get exercise compared to the groups that don't. We know that exercise helps behavior, helps physical symptoms, and a whole lot of other outcomes, a whole lot of other endpoints in those with Alzheimer's. And again, more evidence, less evidence for some of these, but when everything's pointing in the right direction, when everything also makes sense and is reasonable and is not someone trying to do backflips to explain to you how something might in theory work, it's very suggestive. But then you get a whole lot of research studies together, thousands, tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands of people in some of these studies when you try to add different studies together, and it works. And it seems like moderate exercise is perhaps the best, so breaking a sweat, but even mild exercise really does lower the risk of memory problems and developing Alzheimer's disease. So compared to a group who's sedentary, some of the cleanest numbers, the best numbers I found, compared to a group of people who are sedentary versus a group of people who are more active, you got a 40% higher risk of developing Alzheimer's disease dementia over time. So, right, certainly not small numbers. Now, if you can't, I'm not saying run a marathon, right? Great if you can, but this study was actually in people with vascular dementia, a different kind of disease, but clear benefits to the brain. 20 minutes of walking 3 days a week was enough to start slowing down memory problems. So up to a point, it seems like more is better, but it's not, oh, I can't do that, forget it. No, getting off the subway a stop early and walking, getting off the elevator, a floor early and walking. So getting it into your routine, having it done regularly, and even just getting short bits of extra exercise into your day does really seem to add up and make a significant difference. You can do more, great. And if not, then don't worry, right? More really is, right? Some really is better than nothing. And in combination, which we'll get to at the end, in combination, all of these different things add up to really substantially lower your risk of developing Alzheimer's. What type of exercise should I get? Well, the biggest studies, the ones where I try to look at 400,000 people at a time, don't really specify, because you can't ask questions like that and really have enough people. But it seems like aerobic exercise, so things that get your heart rate up, have the best evidence. So running, jogging, other, but it seems like, again, anything, there's less evidence for things like resistance or strength training. Separately from exercise, the studies on things like yoga and Tai Chi do seem to work, but perhaps maybe not through the exercise pathways, through the channels. Right now, my boss is doing a study on dancing, because it seems like perhaps, and again, we can't prove this yet, but it seems like exercising the body and the mind together as opposed to separately might actually be better than exercising the mind alone. I don't know, and he's doing a study, and we're going to find out the answer in a couple years. But we're testing it. One of the many things that we are testing to try to see how we can get people the best information and how we can support the stuff that we're saying to, right? Because if we're going to tell people, yes, 20 minutes of walking 3 days a week, yeah, I could support that, but should I try to encourage you to do more? Probably. How strongly should I encourage you? We're going to find out. But certainly the exercise seems to lower the risk. Health risk status. So there are many health risks that can significantly, to a very large degree, change your risk of developing Alzheimer's. I'm going to highlight 4 here. Next week, we're going to talk a little bit about head injury. We're going to talk about sleep, talk about stress, which are health risks, right? Stress isn't just stress. Stress is a chemical in our bodies. But here I'm going to talk about 4, just in the interest of not throwing too much at people at any one time. So high blood pressure. High blood pressure, we know, hurts thinking and cognition directly and also indirectly. So both short-term, very high blood pressure, but also long-term, having even medium high blood pressure seems to hurt memory. And we have a lot of supporting evidence that people who have high blood pressure over time have smaller brain sizes. People who have high blood pressure over time have signs on MRI, on these brain pictures of their brain, of brain damage. And it seems that people who have high blood pressure, chronically sustained high blood pressure, have about a 60% higher chance of having dementia than those who don't. Now, there is more of an association with vascular dementia, with blood vessel damage. Makes sense, blood vessel. But even in people who have no blood vessel damage that you can find, even if you do an MRI scan and say, if it looks fine, I see no evidence of blood vessel damage, there's still a higher risk of getting Alzheimer's if you have high blood pressure compared to if you don't. Well, I got high blood pressure. Too late for me now? No, because we know treating high blood pressure with medicine gets rid of that risk. Now, what medicine you use? Well, we're studying that. Some of the folks in our geriatrics department in Montefiore are doing some studies on that now. They've done stuff. And we're trying to fine tune our evidence. Really, what can we recommend and what dose and how? And for our purposes right now, it doesn't matter, right? The numbers matter more. If you are in general taking medicine, it is better than if you are not. And if you can actually get your blood pressure down to a appropriate level, that matters a whole lot more than anything else. So don't sweat which medicine. You want a medicine that you can remember to take. You want a medicine that's not giving you any side effects. And you want a medicine that's working for you. And if it does, great, then move on, don't worry about it. Now, over-treating is bad, right? You shouldn't treat to the point that you get dizzy, head rush when you stand up, because it seems like dizziness on standing actually might increase your risk of having memory problems. So we don't want people to have low blood pressure, but with a caveat that low blood pressure in older adults might be a sign of illness, right? That might be an early sign of different kinds of diseases. So a little tricky. And so the risks that we find when we're trying to study blood pressure, I can prove that to you in middle-aged adults, so average age, depending on the study, 40s, 50s. But older adults, I have a little bit less evidence, because we know that people whose blood pressures all of a sudden drop, that might be a sign something else is going on. But as best we can tell, there is still good evidence that having a controlled blood pressure, even when you're older, lowers your risk of developing memory problems. And if you have memory problems, it slows down the rate of decline. But again, especially as you get older, I don't want your blood pressure so low that you're getting dizzy. If someone comes into my office and says, "Doc, every time I stand up, I get one of those things and I have to sit back down again," that means you're on too much medication. We should lower it, or we should otherwise adjust what you're on, because I want a happy medium. I don't want your blood pressure so high that you've got high risk, but I don't want you so low that you're at risk for falls or at risk for actually having too little blood pressure for your brain. Cholesterol, indirectly, there are much stronger links through heart disease, through stroke. Directly, there's a little bit less evidence, and I'm getting into a little more controversial ground here, but there still seems to be robust enough that I feel comfortable saying it to an audience that yes, controlling cholesterol is going to lower your risk of having memory loss, of having all types of cognitive decline and dementia. Again, our studies aren't perfect, but also some of them are also trying to compare people through medication. So statins are a family of medicines used to try to treat cholesterol. They're the most common kind of cholesterol medicine. Some of them you may have heard of: simvastatin or Zocor, atorvastatin or Lipitor, rosuvastatin, all of these medicines. And people said, "Oh, statins hurt memory." Well, wait a minute. Some of the studies that people base that on showed that statins hurt memory, but if you looked at it, you were comparing people who had high cholesterol, who had a statin, with people who did not have high cholesterol. That doesn't work, right? You can't compare apples and oranges and expect that having an apple peel changes your risk, because people who have high cholesterol aren't the same as those who have not high cholesterol. What happens if you only look at those who have high cholesterol? Those taking a statin and those not taking a statin, wait, I've got more than a 40% risk reduction. I can lower my risk of Alzheimer's by maybe 40%, 45% by taking a statin. Okay. And now it doesn't seem like, at least as far as we can tell so far, that a healthy adult, someone who doesn't have high cholesterol, can lower their risk of taking a statin. But those who do have high cholesterol, it does seem like it's very protective. And in certain other things, if you have certain kinds of heart disease, high cholesterol, stroke, even more reason. So in those people, we got much better evidence. But even if you don't have that, it seems like just having high cholesterol and keeping it under control with a statin lowers your risk substantially of developing Alzheimer's. Diabetes, this one's clear. This one, we've got tons of evidence, and it's an even bigger number. It seems like diabetes makes your risk of developing Alzheimer's disease or all-cause dementia. Again, remember, dementia is this whole umbrella, 50 to 60% higher. The longer you got diabetes, the worse your diabetes, the higher your risk. And when you treat it, that risk drops. Now, unclear exactly which medications are best. Again, something that is actively being studied, and we're always trying to refine our evidence and figure out which one or ones are the best. But for right now, I don't care. I want your sugars under control, and I don't want you developing vision loss. I don't want you developing tingling in your feet and kidney problems. I want your sugar under control, and I get to bother you in my office for the next 10 years on average because you don't have that. Now, over-treatment is also bad, right? If your sugar is dropping, you're getting more that kind of dizzy, sweaty, clammy, that's bad. And we know that short-term, very high or very low sugar can cause memory problems. So I want a happy medium. Now, what number? Oh, my A1C is, well, if you're 90, and I'd say, well, your 10-year risk of developing heart attack or stroke based on it, I don't really care, right? If you're 90, then it's more important that you don't have any side effects of that medication. And if you're 20, then your 10 or 20-year risk of having a heart attack matters a lot more. So exactly what number depends on your age, depends on your medical problems. And finally, the American Diabetes Association got together with their American Geriatric Society and all these groups, and they said, you know what? There's no one number. The one number is what is right for you and the rest of your health. And the right number for me is not the right number for you. But we know without a doubt, controlling diabetes substantially lowers your risk of seeing me in the office in a couple of years or seeing me when I'm in the hospital with a stroke or other problems. So controlling the diabetes. Smoking is also an easy one. Smoking bad. That's it. More than a 60% higher risk, but it's likely an underestimate because smokers are a lot more likely to die young than non-smokers. And if you get rid of the oldest people, and age is a risk factor for getting Alzheimer's disease and other dementias. So we're not even seeing the full benefit because so many people who smoke die younger of other stuff. Now, I've been smoking for 50 years, too late for me. Nope. If you don't have Alzheimer's or memory loss, quitting lowers your risk. Once you quit for 4 years, your risk drops massively. And even quitting for a shorter amount of time, your risk starts to drop pretty quickly. And cutting down is helpful. I can't quit. I tried 20 times. I can't keep those patches lit. Fine. So smoking 10 cigarettes is better than smoking 20. Smoking 5 is better than smoking 10. And so anything you can do, even to lower the amount that you smoke, lowers your risk. And if you already have memory loss, quitting still slows down your memory loss. So anything you can do to decrease or stop is helpful, even if it's already been 50 years. Doesn't matter. Anything I can do to even help you cut down is great. And you know what? Instead of spending $14 a pack, if you're only buying half a pack a day, $7, you know what? Go take that $7, go buy yourself a salad. I got good evidence that that's going to lower your risk, and call it a day. So overall, big picture across the whole world, as best we can tell, I can prevent or delay about 40% of all dementia across the planet by trying to fix these modifiable risk factors, these lower education and hearing loss and blood pressure and alcohol and smoking and physical inactivity and diabetes. Some of these I didn't get to today, but big picture, right? This is not hopeless. Just because I can't cure this today doesn't mean that we cannot do a whole lot to lower the risk of developing Alzheimer's disease and other dementias, and that we can't slow the rate of decline. I didn't show you, and I didn't talk about the numbers for slowing the rate of decline when you have it, but they're pretty similar to the things that I talked about. So getting better answers. As of, I think this study came out, someone actually crunched the numbers in mid to late 2020. There were 136 different research studies looking at 121 different treatments for Alzheimer's disease. And for these trials, we needed 31,000 participants across the US. So again, the only way we know what to tell you, how much, why, when, how, is by testing stuff. Because otherwise, I got some great ideas. But if I don't know that these great ideas actually work, I shouldn't be telling you about them. So we really strongly encourage you to participate in clinical trials. Again, some of them are medicines, some of them are supplements, some of them are exercise, some of them, can I find a better blood test? Anything we can do to get people better advice is good. Finding a study is easy. Joan mentioned the Alzheimer's Association. They have this thing called Trial Match. I went on the Alzheimer's Association website a couple of months ago and I said, I want a study about Alzheimer's disease within 10 miles of my office in 6 Executive Plaza. And in about 52 seconds, I got a list of 42 potential trials. Were any right for me? I don't know, but I got them. If you don't use the internet, you can call the Alzheimer's Association hotline. They'll hook you up. And so I talked about how I know what advice to give. I talked a little bit about diet, exercise, and controlling health risk. And with that, I'm going to stop talking right now. But again, a big thank you to the Alzheimer's Association. Joan does absolutely amazing work with us, so thank you. The folks at the Kensington, also New York State for supporting our program. The giant team that I work with, and also coffee for not increasing my risk of Alzheimer's disease.
Thank you so much. That was wonderful. A lot of really good tidbits of information that I never knew. You know, I found the most interesting was first you have the early changes in memory loss, and then they find that those are the folks that don't really want to exercise. That was very interesting, right? So let's open it up to questions, folks. On your Zoom screen, either at the top or the bottom, you see there is a chat box. There's also a Q&A box. Please feel free to type in your questions. I see we have a question here. Dr. Cohen, in reference to studies, have there been any studies to look at wine versus hard liquor?
Yep. So it's been done. The biggest studies haven't looked at that specifically. So they've just tried to quantify the amount. Just how much were you drinking, or maybe how often? And for the biggest studies, it seems like, again, mild to moderate consumption works. For the smaller studies, again, so I can say this with a little less confidence, but as best we have, it doesn't seem to matter. And once it gets to your stomach and to your blood vessels in your brain, your body doesn't care really what you're drinking. If you're having, right, the alcohol from wine is identical to the alcohol from beer, is identical to the alcohol from scotch. So it doesn't really matter. Alcohol is alcohol, except that there is some very, very limited evidence that there's some other chemicals, perhaps in red wine. This thing called resveratrol might be helpful, but again, we don't have enough evidence to really support it. And you could say, oh, well, who are the people who drink more red wine versus less red wine? But that seems to match with things like the Mediterranean diet. And there are some countries where it's more helpful or where you have more of other things. So hard to get a clear answer. I would say whatever you like. And if you don't like it, don't drink it.
Okay. We have another question. Thought Aricept and Namenda are supposed to slow the progression of Alzheimer's. You said there was no drug to slow the progression.
Right. So those medicines don't actually, so those medicines help. They sort of bump you up, but people keep getting worse at about the same speed. Now, that's a little bit controversial. Some of my colleagues will argue that it does slow things a little bit. I would say the majority would say that it doesn't. And in the biggest studies where if we try to put people together from different studies, it is best I read these studies and as best I read the papers that have been published, I don't think it actually slows things down. That being said, if I could turn back the clock on your Alzheimer's and say, your Alzheimer's now is going to be like you were 9 months ago. Now, is that good enough? No, not at all. But that's still helpful, right? If I could tell you that you know how to use the bathroom for 9 more months, if I can tell you that you're not going to set your house on fire because you remember to turn off your stove for 9 more months, that makes a huge difference. And also, if you look at a population level, right, you look at overall, what do these medicines do? If I can lower your risk of needing to go into a nursing home by 9 months, if I can lower the amount of money that gets spent on you at a healthcare facility. So some studies, when we try to look at just the dollars and cents of it, say, well, oh, these medicines also cost money. But it seems like some people find that the medicines are sort of cost neutral. In other words, the amount you spend is the amount you save. But a number of people have actually found that as a society, we actually save money by treating people with these medicines because we have to spend less on them to take care of them elsewhere. So at an individual level, they do seem to work. At a population level, at a society level, they seem to work. But unfortunately, they don't actually seem to fix the brain and slow down the process.
Okay.
So they're helpful, but not as good as we'd like, which is why more studies.
And we have time for one more question. And can you touch on the environmental factors? I know this person wanted to know if we could do it on the next session, but perhaps you can kind of touch on it right now.
So absolutely. So environmental factors is very, very broad. So social interaction, as Joan mentioned, we know works. So having a more stimulating environment, and yes, lecture and learning another language, great, but you know what? Go and talking to your friend, right? Having a conversation with someone that is not your spouse of 50 years who is finishing your sentence, right, is helpful, right? Crossword puzzle, great. You know what? You don't like crossword puzzles? Fine, do a word search. Like if you sit and drool over a crossword puzzle for 4 hours and then you cheat, that's not helping. Anything that is keeping your mind engaged is good. And environmental factors like air pollution, we know are detrimental, we know are harmful. Exactly how much, what size pollution, what type of pollution, that we're still trying to figure out. But that's why environmental regulation is so important, because clean air, clean water, we know work. Exactly how much, what type, we're figuring out, but we know it works. Environmental factors like secondhand smoke exposure, we know are harmful. Environmental factors like your risk of head injury, some of it is what you do, but some of it is the society in which you live and what you have access to in terms of motor vehicle collisions, in terms of head injuries from sports, in terms of other, we know work. So absolutely, there are environmental factors that come to play. If you have a question on any specific one, I could talk about it, but yes, the answer is yes. Anything that keeps our brains healthy and happy is a good thing.
Okay. So folks, I want to thank you all for joining us tonight. I want to thank our speakers, Joe Nemo and Dr. Jason Cohen. And I also want to thank my colleague, Christiane Lee. She works the back end of all of these Zooms to make it work right. I just want to remind you to please register, if you haven't done so already, for part 2, and that will occur on May 6th, 6:30 p.m. You can go to the Kensington website, www.thekensingtonwhiteplains.com. You can register right there if you haven't done so already. And if you'd like to learn more about the Kensington, please give us a call, 914-390-0080. Please stay put, folks. Remember, we're going to put up that slide with information on how you can contact our speakers. Thanks so much, and we'll see you next
Brenda,
time. Yep.
I forgot to say one thing, forgive me, but as Dr. Cohen mentioned, the research changes, gee, it's 5 minutes later, it probably changed with the information we have. And the Alzheimer's Association is sponsoring a research forum on May 11th. And if you go to our website or if you give us a call, we have 3 extremely interesting researchers who are going to be speaking, and it's new information. So if you're interested, please sign up.
Excellent.
It'll be very interesting. So
excellent. Good.
Thank you I forgot.
No, this is good. Good for everybody to know. Thanks so much, folks. Have a really good evening. Remember to stay on. Thank you.
Thank you all.